Mr. Lionel Carter was a World War II hero, a hobby pioneer, and continues to this day to be a true gentleman in every sense of the word. From the time he walked into a drugstore and bought his first pack of DeLong gum cards in 1933, to the day he stopped actively collecting a half-century later, he contributed positively to the great hobby of ours through the articles he wrote, the collection he assembled, and the gentlemanly manner in which he always conducted himself. In this video, we are pleased to introduce to you this hobby pioneer and give you a glimpse of the incredible collection he amassed.
Well, I got in the hobby in 1965. You know that, and it was, and then it was strictly a letter writing hobby. I mean, there was no such thing as using the phone. The trade papers, so to speak, okay, were nothing like the sophisticated magazines that we get today. They were mostly mimeographed, hand mimeographed, printed in people's basements, and all these sort of archaic trade papers, the Sports Trader, they had articles in them. And they would be written by hobbyists. And so Lionel was very well known for writing articles. He'd write articles about certain sets. He'd write articles about trends. He'd write articles about the hobby in general. And he was very well known in those trade papers, at least to me as a young collector. And a lot of these guys, they contributed in that sort of a way, and that's how we got to know them. I remember sometime in the 70s, I acquired some batter-ups, and Lionel collected batter-ups right out of the packs. He needed one card, okay? He needed one card to complete his set. And I had that card, but it didn't have the top on it. Batter-ups are die cut. And I thought, oh, you know, hey, anybody would want a card to fill their set, so I sent it to him. I remember writing to him. At the time I was living in New Jersey, and I wrote to him, and I put the batter up in an envelope, and I said, Lionel, I want to be the guy to say I completed your batter up set. Here, I don't want anything for it. It'll be a nice filler until you get one with a top. He sent it back to me. I mean, crushing blow to a young collector. He didn't want it. Why? Because it wasn't in condition, and as long as it wasn't in condition, he just didn't want it in his cards. It was as though my little card didn't belong in there with his cards. And I always remembered that. And then when I moved to Chicago, I moved out here in 1975, I wanted to go see this guy's card collection.
As we were going through Lionel Carter's cards and you know, inventorying them and putting them away and getting ready to take them away, I pulled out an article, and I still have the article on my desk. I think I'll keep a copy and hang it on the wall. But the article was done in 1956, and it talks about the fact that a Chicago bank officer or bank executive amasses a sports card collection valued at $1,000. And I just looked at that and I thought, back in 1956, and they had showed Lionel, you know, holding up his DeLong set because he was the first one to assemble that, and it just struck me. I know people talk about the fact that, you know, in the 60s and 70s you could buy T206s for 15 and 20 cents, and if you wanted to pick your own player you could pay 25 cents. But when I saw that and realized what this man had assembled, and that it was worth $1,000 back then, and realized, you know, that you were going to add, you know, at least 3 zeros to that number, it just floored me at what this material is worth today.
It was kind of funny when Doug showed me the article written about Lionel Carter, I guess it was 50 years ago, talking about his collection being worth $1,000. And, you know, you sit back and think about how far the hobby's come from when Lionel first assembled that 32 DeLong set to now, where you know, $1,000 in 1956, I believe it was, seemed like, you know, a multi-million-dollar deal now, and here you are, a collection that's worth, you know, God knows how much money, in the millions.
went in the drugstore and I saw these cards wrapped up, and I said, "What is that?" And he said, "Oh, those are baseball cards." Baseball cards. So I spent my nickel for 5 of them.
He took me over to his apartment, which was across the street from the bank, and he showed me his cards, some of them. He opened them up, and I looked at them, and he said, "This is my hobby, and I intend to continue with the hobby after we're married." And I said, "Okay, who cares?"
Yes. Most of them were on mimeograph, and maybe 8 pages, maybe 10 pages, and they weren't a full-size sheet because they would cut the page in half.
When we got married, we got an apartment, and Lionel said, "Sunday night is card mounting night," and of course that was when Jack Benny was on. So he'd have the radio on, and it was a small apartment, and he'd sit there at the dining room table and mount cards.
So you would you'd collect the set, and
then put them in. You know.
No, it's amazing to me that you're...
That's why all these are the same albums.
Mm-hmm. And it's amazing to me that you were able to fit 20 cards per page. It's pretty tight there.
Uh-huh.
So how much time do you think back in the day it would take you to put an album like this together?
Oh, how about a page?
Yeah, how long would a page take?
There was a fellow named Eddie Golden, and we would swap cards back and forth, and we would send a list of what we had and what we needed, and we could work out a trade like that. He'd send me cards almost every week.
When we bought this house, of course, it had a very small mailbox, and Lionel said, "When I get these cards in the mail, what things that he's bought or traded, they're not going to fit in the mailbox because we worked, and of course, if it rained, they'd get wet." So he ordered that large mailbox from Sears Roebuck.
Either poor or fair or excellent. But I don't think we even played that up too much. If you didn't have the card, you won it regardless of the condition. The small shows that we used to have, and there were, 50 people a lot of times there. And I always sold cards. And usually I sold the big cards for 2 cents, and I still made money on it.
So these are all your duplicates and triplicates probably?
Yeah, right.
And what was your pricing strategy back then?
Well, I just priced them what I thought I could sell them for. That's about the only answer I could give you.
And so these must have been priced too high because you never sold them, right?
Yeah, right.
Whereas today the
I don't
prices
know.
probably look a little more reasonable.
I might have priced these after I stopped going to shows. They would bring cards in and give them to the auctioneer, and they would auction off different sets. And this time Bill Mastro come in, and he said he outbid everybody else for the card. And then he went out and he had a set of cards, and he came back with more money, and he bought that set too. And the next set, and the next thing that was auctioned off, he bought that. So nobody else got anything. He bought the whole auction.
What's going on there? Were you intending to eventually fill that hole?
No.
No. We've talked about that.
Not the way the prices went up.
Yeah.
We had a fellow on the West Coast, and he was putting out a series of baseball cards. He was selling his card collection. And he offered me the Hans Wagner card for $150. And actually, that was the most expensive card he had in his set. I thought it was too much money.
What came first? Did you start assembling the album, or did you put the set together first?
I put them in the album. No, I wouldn't do that because I didn't know who was even in the set complete. There wasn't any list anywhere, you know.
So you would collect the set, and then...
And then put them in. The worst thing about collecting baseball cards, you couldn't tell anybody about it. None of my neighbors knew I collected baseball cards because they were valuable and you couldn't let the word out. And that was terrible. There was just a few people I knew real well and come to visit me, and we'd sit down and go through the albums. But I'd like to have the people around here come in and look at them, but you can't do it. I think because of you. When my cards were missing, I had no idea of what they were or anything else. I hadn't looked in that drawer down here, 3 drawers, for years. And if they come around with the insurance people, or even the police want to know how much it is, how much they're worth, and you did that for me. And I don't know what I'd done without you, because I'd have been stuck with it. I would say, gee, I don't know what they're worth, and I don't know what they are.
Every one of these pioneers of the hobby their collection has its own uniqueness. Nagy was not as condition conscious, but loved incredibly obscure sets. So a Canadian tobacco set would make Nagy crazy. A chocolate set from Canada, you know, an obscure set. He wasn't very focused on 19th century. Okay, he didn't like the 19th century cards. Egan, on the other hand, loved 19th century cards. So Egan had a lot of old judges and a lot of these obscure 19th century issues. Carter, on the other hand, was a guy who really appreciated the fact that he could take the cards out of the packs himself. Okay, there's a uniqueness there. But since he started doing it in 1933, what an incredible thing. Here's a collection assembled by the man who took them out of the packs himself. Each one of these men had his own unique way of collecting, and they were all unique personalities.
As I was paging through various sets of cards that Lionel had, I was going through the 1933 Gowdy set, and I realized that Lionel knew a lot of the hobby pioneers. And as I was going through it, I got next to the page that would hold the Lajoie card, because he meticulously numbered the top left and the bottom right of each page with what card numbers they were. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to turn the page. Is it there? And he looked down. He said, oh, card number 106, it sure is. I said, tell me the story before I turn the page. He said, well, you know, I wasn't much of a letter writer back then, and he was a prolific writer back then, but I don't think he was very controversial. And he said what Burdick was. And he says, Burdick really raised a big stink with Gowdy about the fact that the Lajoie card wasn't included. He said, and he got 10 copies of it, so he sent me one. And I turned the page, and there it is, a pristine, untouched 1933 Lajoie card. So I don't know if every card in those albums has a story, but I'm sure a lot of them do.
To talk to him about the people he met, people I had only read about in the papers, people that I had heard about. Jefferson Burdick, I mean, he knew Jefferson Burdick. He corresponded with Jefferson Burdick. Jefferson Burdick was, you know, was long gone by the time I got in the hobby, but his collection's in the New York Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. I mean, this collection, this phenomenal collection, and Lionel Carter was his friend. He knew him, okay, and he knew all these pioneers of the hobby, and I got to know a lot of them too, as time went on. But I was the young kid, and he was the old scholarly gentleman. How many guys are you ever going to meet in your lifetime in our hobby, especially now, all right? But even then, who actually took the cards out of the packs and kept them, Okay, now that is just unheard of, and he was always a guy that shared that information with people, and because he loved baseball cards from the time he was very young, and saved them all his life, and never stopped saving them. Most of the material, at least as he got a little bit older and a little more sophisticated and a little more careful, is in impeccable condition. Now in 1933, when he took the Longs out of the packs, or Gowdies, they aren't quite as perfect as when he was a little bit older and a little more careful with the stuff. But his material from the stuff that he bought from the late 30s all the way up through the Topps and Bowman he's essentially the only person that ever touched it, other than the packing at the plant. And he collected that way. So let's say he collected 1938 Gowdy right out of the packs, the heads up. Well, there might be a couple of cards he needed. So essentially his 1938 Gowdy set is near mint to mint or mint, but there's a couple of cards in there that are VG, VGX, because he needed a couple of cards, and they were decent cards, they weren't bad. And of course today's grading standards are psychotic. And so he'd fill the set in. The thing that really hit me about Carter's cards, and of course we were laughing when we were at the house, because it still hits me today as much as it did, let's say, when I came out here to Chicago in the mid-70s and looked at them. And there is no change of them. I mean, they've been in the dark for since the day Lionel took them out of the packs. But the color of them, the brightness, they're so vibrant. You open up albums of cards and you're looking at them, and they're unaffected by time. They're unaffected by light. They're unaffected by environment. Okay, they've been put away for so long that they're untouched. The only one that ever touched them was Lionel. And you have to remember something else too. Over a period of the last 25 years plus, no one's looked at the cards. This isn't a hobby that where Lionel said, you know, I want my collection to be accessible to all the hobbyists. Please come in droves and handle them. Okay? No one ever went and looked at them. So there's a quality to them when you're looking at them. The surface gloss, the surface quality, it's all still perfectly intact. And you just don't see that on any collection.
Lionel just had a little grin on his face, and he said, "You want to see the cards?" I said, "I absolutely want to see the cards." And so he took me down into the basement, and we were able to spend some time going through the collection. And for me, it was just a step back in time. I mean, when I look at people's collections, you know, to me, an older collection are people who have them in top loaders or plastic pages, as opposed to the newer people who have them all in PSA and SGC holders. Well, when I got there, I saw this row of scrapbooks. They looked like encyclopedias. And I said, "Well, where are the cards, Lionel?" And he pointed to the books. He said, "Pull those out, you'll see them." And what Lionel did was he would meticulously take these scrapbooks, which, by the way, he said he was that company's best customer. He would take these scrapbooks that were probably made in the 30s or 40s, and he would cut out every other page, because he knew that if he filled every page, the book would get too thick and it might damage the cards. So what he did is he cut out every other page, and then he would meticulously take corner mounts from photos and use those to mount each card in the album. Careful not to get the glue on the card, and for some of the smaller cards he would even meticulously cut out the corners of those photo mounts so you could see as much of the cards as possible. And so when I first opened that album, and the first one I opened was one of my favorite sets, the T206 set, I just opened the pages and I was awestruck by the color, you know. And I'm not going to talk about the technical grade of the cards, you know. Were some of them near mint to mint? Absolutely. Were there any creases in there? I don't think there's a one. But it was just the color and the fact that, you know, you had that many cards mounted to a page, and how he meticulously would type out, you know, here are the Southern League cards, and you know, all the information regarding the sets from the American card catalog. You know, once I had opened that album, I just realized that I was going to be spending a long time in Lionel Carter's basement to be able to really get a feel for how significant this collection is. Now that we're, we've spent some time, going through some of the sets and pulling out some of the cards, I've spent a number of evenings at home, meticulously taking these cards out of the album one card at a time, and I am just floored, I guess, by the condition of the cards and just by the vibrant color of the cards. You're so used to seeing cards that, be it Diamond Stars or Gaudis or whatever early, colorful issues, have seen the light of day. And by handling the cards, by taking them out from time to time, by seeing the light of day, they tend to fade or don't quite have the vibrancy that they had when they were originally pulled from the packs. Well, that's what marks this collection. The fact that, when somebody buys the 38 Gaudi heads-up set, they're not going to want to break it up. They're going to want to keep those cards together. Even though there might be some technically higher grades out there to add to their set so they can have the best set in existence, they are not going to want to get rid of those other cards because they've been together forever. They belong together.
From what I understand, Lionel actually took these cards out of packs himself and kept them together from 1938. I guess he was a teenager at the time and really appreciated card collecting and was sort of an advanced collector. And it's just amazing to see all these cards in one group completely untouched for 80 years or 70 years. The thing that jumps out at you about Lionel's cards is the vibrant color on almost every card. And it's just from 38 Gaudi to 51 Bowman to 55 Topps, the cards just have this unbelievable fresh look to them where the colors are just like the cards were printed yesterday. And unfortunately, one of the things about the way our grading scale and any grading company's grading scale is set up is that you really don't get bonus points for great color on cards. And I just hope the people that buy these cards realize how special they are. The difference between Lionel Carter's collection and Egan's collection or Frank Nagy's collection is that where those guys were focused on completion and rarity, Lionel was focused on condition.
I'd be telling Doug Allen about the Lionel Carter collection, and he said to me one day, he said, I'm going to go and visit him. I just want to see what you're talking about. You've talked about it so much. I want to see what you're talking about. And the next thing you know, Doug Allen's going to Evanston. He's visiting with the Carters. He's going to meet with them.
My history with Lionel Carter, or Lionel and Irma Carter, is really not a long one. I just first met them a little over 6 months ago. I've talked to Lionel for a while, and I've heard about him forever. I mean, I've been in the hobby, close to 20 years now, and have heard for years about the Lionel Carter collection. They've done stories about it. When you live in the atmosphere that I live in of high-value collectibles and cards, you can't help but for people to talk about Lionel Carter's collection. So to me, it was a collection of mythical proportions.
So here's me. I know this guy for almost 40 years, okay, ever since I get in the hobby, and Doug Allen goes and closes the deal. I mean, it's amazing. It's just amazing. But the Carters felt very comfortable with Doug, and appropriately so, because I do too, and it turned out to just be fantastic.
Irma greeted me at the door, and she said, Lionel's waiting for you downstairs. When I got downstairs, the basement was in a little bit of a state of disarray. Some of the cards were still kind of spread out on the table and on the floor, and I said, Lionel, you got to get those things back into their closet, into your drawer. He said, let me help you, I got some time. And he said, well, I figured you wanted them. And I said, wanted them? What are you talking about? I'm an auctioneer, of course I want them. And he said, no. He says, you know what, I think it's time. And I turned around and looked at Irma, and she had kind of a knowing smile and a nod, almost like they had pre-planned this what to me was really great news. And she said that they were comfortable, with the process, and they were ready to sell the cards.
And out of the blue, I forget where I was, but I think I was out of town somewhere. I get a phone call, okay, from Doug saying that without any fanfare, they said they wanted him to take the cards away because it was time for them to remove them from the house.
When Doug and I spoke about this collection, we realized that it was absolutely essential that we pedigreed it, because Lionel is considered one of the hobby pioneers and really the pioneer when it comes to high-grade material. So the best thing about this collection was it was so fresh, it was so high-grade, where most pioneers didn't really weren't too crazy about the condition. Lionel was over the top, and essentially all of his cards are mint. The first card we graded for Lionel Carter was the M101-4 Babe Ruth card, which most people consider to be his rookie card. Lionel had a 1938 Gaudy Hank Greenberg. To this point, SGC's only encapsulated one pre-World War II card, 98 Gem Mint. This 38 Gaudy Greenberg is the second one we've slabbed. It is absolutely flawless. My favorite card in the deal was the 51 Mantle. It was, without a doubt, the best one I've ever seen. And to this point, I've owned the highest graded copy. This card is just phenomenal. I mean, the color, stunning, perfect corners, perfect centering, just a virtually gem mint card.
And we designed it in such a way that it would be a tribute to him. All that, you know, a lot of the cards are going to have his name on the holders. They'll spread out all across the hobby with his name. But what an incredible thing.
All of this being said, with being able to spend time with the Carters, with hearing from Bill Mastro about, you know, the history that he's had with the Carters, you know, I hope that the hobby will enjoy the Lionel Carter collection. It doesn't matter if it goes for, you know, how much money it goes for. I mean, that's a big deal too. I'm sure that will take care of itself. But I hope when people get these different cards that are graded that say the Lionel Carter collection, that they'll cherish those cards, that they'll keep them in their collection, and they'll realize that by, you know, keeping them in those holders, don't worry about upgrades, don't worry about crossing them over, don't worry about anything else. Just you know, recognize the fact, appreciate the fact that what you're holding is a card that was, you know, that was put aside, you know, be it 30, 50, 60 years ago by one of the pioneers of our hobby, and you know, embrace that and realize the importance of that.
I would have liked to have seen one collector get the entire set and keep it that way. I would like to be remembered as a collector and a person that added a lot in the early days to the hobby.